Okay, so we're going to go through some of the questions for Petites Test Part 1 tomorrow. So remember, when we are multiplying things with exponents, we multiply the big numbers and add the small ones. So when we multiply 3 times negative 2 times negative 4, we get a positive 24. And when we add 2, 4, and 5 together, we get t to the 11th. Okay? The trick to questions like number 2 is to remember what you're distributing. You're distributing the negative sign that's touching the parentheses, not foiling the first parenthesis into the second one. So we distribute this negative into the second parenthesis. We get 2c cubed plus 8c squared plus 9 minus 4c squared minus 2c plus 6. Remember, a negative times a negative gives back to being positive. Then we combine what they have in common. So 2c cubed doesn't have anything else that's like it, so it stays as 2c cubed. 8c squared minus 4c squared gives me a positive 4c squared. Negative 2c is by itself, and when I combine 9 and 6, I get plus 15. Okay, there's nothing that I can combine here, so we're going to pull out our GCF. Our GCF is both numbers and letters. Remember, it's the biggest number we can divide into all of them, which would be 5, and then it's the smallest exponent on each letter. So since we have an x squared, an x cubed, and an x cubed, my smallest one is x squared. Since we have a y to the 4th, and a y squared, the smallest one is y. Okay, so then we're going to go through and divide. So 10 divided by 5 gives me 2. The x squareds cancel and the y's cancel. 15 divided by 5 gives me 3. X cubed divided by x squared just gives me x, and y to the 4th divided by y gives me y cubed. Okay, 5 divided by 5 is just 1. X cubed divided by x squared is x, and y squared divided by y is y. Okay. All right, the thing to remember about problems like F is the fact that it's squared, which means there are 2 of the same parentheses. It does not mean just to square what's there. It means that we have to FOIL itself by itself. So 3a squared times 3a squared gives me 9a to the 4th. 3a squared times negative 2b gives me a negative 6a squared b. Negative 2b times 3a squared gives me negative 6a squared b. And negative 2b times negative 2b gives me a positive 4b squared. Then we have to go through and combine our like terms. The 2 that are like terms are these middle 2 terms. So negative 6 minus 6 is going to give me negative 12. The exponents don't change when we're adding and subtracting, so it stays as a squared b. And we add the 4b squared. Okay, for problems like this where there's a fractional exponent, this first one is the exponent, and the second one is the radical. Okay, so we're going to take the square root of 16x to the 12th, and we're going to raise that to the 3rd power. So the square root of 16 is 4. The square root of x to the 12th is 6 pairs of x's, so that's x to the 6th, and then we cube it. So 4 cubed is 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64, and x, we multiply these, 6 times 3 gives me 18, so x to the 18. Okay, I have faith that you can solve equations, especially using your graphing calculator tomorrow, but we are going to go down here and talk about inequalities. Remember, with inequalities, we have to solve with x on the left side, so we're always going to move our x's to the left because that's the only way we know how to graph them. Okay, when we have an or, we're going to shade opposite directions most of the time, and if we have an and, we're going to shade between them most of the time. So here, I'm going to solve for x first. So I have to add my 4. 3x is less than 6, and we divide by the 3. Since I divided by a positive number, I'm going to get x is less than 2. Okay, on this side, this is where the x being on the left-hand side comes into play. We're going to move the 2x over to the left with the other x. So we get 3 minus 3x is less than negative 6. We have to move this 3 that's in front over to the other side, so we're going to subtract that. So we get negative 3x is less than negative 9. And my last step is to divide. Anytime I divide by a negative, remember I have to flip this inequality symbol. So we're going to get x is greater than negative 9 divided by negative 3 is a positive 3. Then we have to graph it on the number line. So on the number line, we're going to have 2 and we're going to have 3. Neither of them have inequalities that are underlined, so they're both going to be open circles. And since this one points to the left, we're going to shade left from 2, and this points to the right, we're going to shade right from 3. Now the part you have to remember here is your interval notation. So we go from negative infinity to negative 2. Negative 2 is, or not to negative 2, to positive 2. 2 is not part of my solution because it's an open circle, so it has to be an open parenthesis. And we union that with 3 to infinity. So basically our answer can be anything except between 2 and 3. All right. Moving on. This is something that a lot of y'all struggle with.
Tasneem Saeed, go to the reception area. Tasneem Saeed.
Okay, this is using our words and changing them into equations. So it says 4 times the sum. Sum means we're going to add a number and 6. So we're going to add a number and 6. And it says 4 times that, so we're going to multiply that whole thing by 4. Is the same as means equals. 5 less than means I'm taking 5 away from twice the number. So from 2x, we're taking away 5. Okay? For problems like number 5, where it has the number in parentheses, we're just going to take that and plug it into x. If you have a graphing calculator, you can plug that in, put the equation into y equals, and just go to the table where x is negative 2. Okay? For number 6, you have to get it in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form means y equals. So I would distribute through the 3, and then I would move the 2. Okay, we're going to start here again on number 7. Okay, so a horizontal line goes from left to right. It goes through the y-axis, so it's y equals a number. A vertical line goes up and down. It goes through the x-axis, so it's x equals a number. Okay, since this is asking for the horizontal, we're looking for y equals. Well, y is 2 in this table, or in this point, so y is going to equal 2. Okay, for number 8, it's kind of a difficult question, but with the multiple choice answers you get tomorrow, it's not so bad. You're going to take each point and you're going to plug it in and see which one gives you a true statement. So if we start with A, and we use this point right here, negative 3, 2, 3 times negative 3 plus 2 times 2 has to give me 5. 3 times negative 3 gives me negative 9. 2 times 2 gives me 4. Negative 4 plus 5, negative 9 plus 4 is not going to give me a positive 5. So this cannot be my equation. So then we go to the next equation. 2 times negative 3 minus 3 times 2, and see if that gives me negative 5. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 3 times 2 is 6, so 6 minus 6, or negative 6 minus 6 is going to give me negative 12, which does not equal negative 5. So that is wrong. So then we come over here to C. 3 times negative 3 plus 2 times 2, and see if that gives us negative 5. So 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. 2 times 2 is 4. When I add 4 to negative 9, I get negative 5. So this one is, in fact, a true statement. To double check ourselves, we're also going to plug in 1, 4. So 3 times 1 plus 2 times negative 4, and see if that gives us negative 5. So 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 4 is negative 8. So 3 minus 8 gives me negative 5. We're good to go. Okay. In order to answer a question like number 9, where it asks you for an x-intercept, a slope, or a y-intercept, and it gives you the equation not in y equals format, what we have to do is we have to change it to y equals format. So in order to do that, when we have x and y on the same side, we first have to subtract the x. So we get negative 7y equals negative 3x plus 42. And then we have to divide by the coefficient. So when we do this, we get y equals 3 over 7x minus 6. This is called slope-intercept form because this is the slope and this is the y-intercept. Okay, so when it says slope, x-intercept, and y-intercept, we already know that the slope is 3 over 7. And we know that the y-intercept is 0, negative 6. Now to find the x-intercept, what I have to do is plug in 0 for y. So if I plug in 0 here, We're looking for where 0 equals 3 over 7x minus 6. So to solve that, we would add the 6. So we get 6 equals 3/7 x. And then to get rid of the 3/7, we're going to multiply by 7 and divide by 3. So when we do that, we get 14. So the x-intercept is at 14, 0. Okay? Remember, for parallel lines, that means that they have to have the same slope. And then if they give you options, you would plug in and see which one the point made true, just like we did on 8. Okay? Perpendicular, we have to flip. So this parallel slope would be 2/3. Here we have to double flip for the perpendicular. So that would be a negative, and then we have to flip the fraction. So since it's 2 over 3, it's going to become 3 over 2. All right, we got a couple more to talk about, and then we will be done with the video. Okay, for when we're talking about systems, remember you can have 3 numbers of solutions. You can have 0 if they're parallel, infinite if they're the same line, or 1 solution if they're intersecting lines. Based on the equations here, since this side of the equation is the same and this side is different, that means we're going to have parallel lines because their slope is going to be the same. So if they're parallel lines, that means we have no solutions. Okay? Over here, nothing about any of our equations is the same, so that means they're going to have to intersect somewhere. So this tells me that we have 1 solution. Okay, talking about solving by substitution, you'll have one equation that says x equals or y equals, and you're going to take that and plug it into the other equation. Since this one says x equals, we're going to take and plug this negative 2y into x. So we get 6 times negative 2y minus 3y, and that has to give me 5. 6 times negative 2y gives me negative 12y, minus 3y equals 5. Negative 12y minus 3y gives me negative 15y equals 5, and then I have to divide. 5 doesn't get divided by 15 evenly, so we end up with a fraction negative 1/3. We also need to be able to find the x value. So to do that, we're going to take this and plug it into the equation we circled in the first place. So to find x, we're going to take this value we found and multiply it by negative 2. So negative times negative is going to become positive. Remember, a whole number is over 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 3 is 3. So my coordinate for my solution would be 2/3, comma, negative 1/3. Okay, let's talk about elimination real quick. This isn't a good example of how to use elimination, so I'm going to rewrite it. 6x minus 3y equals 5, and x plus 2y equals 10. Remember, for elimination, the goal is to be able to add the equations together and to eliminate a variable. So the easiest one to eliminate here is going to be x, because one has a number and one doesn't. In order to eliminate it when I add it, it has to be the same number but a different sign. So to do that on this one, we would need to multiply by negative 6. Okay? When we multiply that through here, we're going to get 6x minus 3y equals 5, stays the same. And then we get negative 6x minus 12y equals negative 60. When I add these together, this goes away, and I can solve for y. Once I solve for y, I'm going to pick one of the equations to plug it back into and solve for x. Okay. Last question is graphing 2 variable inequalities. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is to eliminate answer choices. And the way you're going to do that is by looking at the symbol. If it's underlined, that means we need a solid line on our graph. And if it's not underlined, like this one here, that means we need a dashed line. Okay, so we know it has to be dashed. We can't say anything else from this equation besides the fact that this line has to be dashed. We have to get this to say y equals before we can graph it, or y is less than or greater than, or whatever symbol we're using. So we start that by subtracting the x, just like we did on the other problem we had to solve for y. So we get negative 2y is less than negative x plus 6, and I have to divide by this negative 2. Remember, with inequalities, if we divide by a negative, we have to flip the symbol. So we get y is greater than x over 2 minus 3. When we're graphing, remember, our y-intercept is where we begin on the y, and then we go up 1 over 2, because remember, anything in front of x is a 1. So we go up 1 over 2 And we keep doing that until we run out of space, and then we can go down 1 and over 2. Okay, so there's dashed line. Okay, and since it's greater than, that means we're going to shade above the line. If this was a less than still, like it was in the beginning, we would shade below. But we can't determine that until we get y by itself. Okay, the other concept that's going to be on here tomorrow is going to be factoring, and then everything else will be on part 2 of the test on Thursday. So, if you were here today, make sure you're bringing your review back. If you weren't here today, make sure you watch this video until you understand the problems. I will see you all tomorrow.